What's up? What's up, everybody? It's your boy, the Cabrini kid himself. Um, we don't have our guest tonight. She had an emergency come up last minute. We hope that everything with her is good. Obviously, hopefully, hoping that it's nothing too serious. But we are still here. We're still here. And one of the things that is important about this show is it's almost the holidays. Um, it's almost the holidays, and there's been a lot that's been going on in the world right now. And around this time last year, we did a "What Are You Thankful For" show. Um, and I think it's super important now that we do that, even though we have a show next week already lined up. But that show is going to be a little bit different. But I want to take this time because we have an opportunity to talk about some of the things we're thankful for this year. Right, 2025, I think, has been hard for everybody. Um, it's been very different. Um, but I think that the thing with the way the world has been going is that there's a lot of things for us to be thankful for and to remember that we have an opportunity to be great every day, right? We wake up, um, we have more than enough opportunity to go out and do the things that we need to do to be great. And I think that we will obviously make sure that we can do that. And one of the ways that I think that we can be great is when you are um, when you're thinking about yourself as a person. One of the ways that you can be great is your mental health. Um, you know, eh, whether that's women's mental health, men's mental health. Obviously, I'm going to be a huge advocate for men's mental health going into um, 2026. But I also think that it's important for us to remember our mental health when we think about society, right? Um, I think that we have had just in 2026 a couple of, what's the right word to use? We've had moments where there has been a lot of turmoil. And because of that turmoil, we have been pulled into conversations, whether that's with coworkers, whether that's with family, whether that's with um, significant others, right? We've been pulled into conversations that have affected our mental health, and it's trying at times. But one of the biggest things is that you have to remember that it's okay to not have those conversations, right? You don't have to engage in those conversations with everybody, right? Um, if you feel a certain way, whether it's about politics, whether it's about race relations, whether it's about um, women's rights, men's mental health, like I said earlier, any of the social issues, you don't have to have those conversations with people. I think that we get caught up a lot of times in trying to convince other people that the way that we see things is the right way versus the way that they see things. And it's okay to let people have their point of view. Um, and I was having this conversation with a former guest of the show that um, my goal is not to convince you that the way that I think about things is the right way. Um, I present things, whether that's on Facebook, whether it's on Instagram, TikTok, whatever. I present things because I think it's funny, I think it's interesting. Um, but I'm not presenting it to convince people that the way that I think is the right way and the way that they think is the wrong way. And sometimes you have to let people have it. You have to say, it's okay, bro, you got it. Miss Ma'am, it's okay the way you think you got it. Because that's the way that you protect your mental health and your peace going into 2026. Um, I think it's very easy that once you step out on that ledge and you start getting pulled into those conversations, it's easy to spin out of control. It's easy to lose focus on what's really important to you because now you're in a back and forth with people who have a different point of view. But you get pulled into a mindset of I have to A, state my point to this person, but then I also have to B, convince them that the way that I feel is validated and correct, and the way that they feel is not valid and not correct. And that's a very slippery slope to be on. Very slippery slope to be on. Um, you don't have to have those feelings toward people, right? Going into 2026, we are halfway through November. Obviously, we have all of November, December, so we have 6 weeks left in 2025. We got 6 weeks left, and at the end of the day, going into 2026, the person that you need to be most concerned about is you, right? And that's one of the biggest ways you can do it is recognizing opportunities where you say, you know what, I don't need to be involved in this conversation with you. Um, I might state my point, you may state your point, and if you don't agree, you got it. It's all good. I don't have to go back and forth because you don't see it my way, and it's not my job to convince you to see it my way. It's also not their job to convince you to see it their way. But they've gone down that slope, and so at the end of the day, you want to make sure that you have a grasp on what it is that you're trying to convey, and realize that everyone's not going to see it the same way that you see it, and that's perfectly fine. And I think that that's one of the big things that I don't want to say I struggled with it, but I think it's one of the big things that I had to learn to adopt over the last couple years, because I was very apt to get into a back and forth with people about how I see things, and things of that nature. And I always tell people, if you look on Facebook and I post something on Facebook, I post it and then I kind of fade into the background and I let all the people who are commenting comment. I might say that's very interesting. What about this? What about that? Um, but it's never me trying to sway them. And as a content creator, that's kind of challenging because you're in a space where you have a voice, and people are going to look to you to champion certain things, right? Um, in a prior post on Facebook, I mentioned that a young lady um, wanted me to use my platform to speak more about how men can be more to the forefront, how men can reclaim their positions that they once had in society. And her and I would go back and forth about it because the reasons why we didn't think that men were at the forefront like they should be, we saw it differently. And it got to the point where I said, we don't agree on that. We're not going to agree on that. You see it from your perspective. I see it from my perspective. And it kind of clicked to me that I don't have to try to convince you to see it from a man's perspective. Um, and so that just kind of goes to my point that I was making, that at times you have to say, you know what? I need to bow out from this conversation respectfully, but I need to bow out from the conversation. I need to let the people um, who view it differently, I need to let them view it differently. They have to lead and walk their own path in life, and they will. Um, and you have to let them. Sometimes you have to let them, and that's fine. Um, but one of the things that I wanted to definitely talk about was this past Friday, we brought back Ask a Black Guy. And for the people who have been a fan of the Cabrini Kid podcast from the beginning, Ask a Black Guy was something that we started in 2017, 2018, where once a week, people would either write in questions throughout the week, and they would watch the live to have those questions answered, or they would watch it later. And it's really what got me started on the content creation path. And I have probably twice as many social media contacts now than I did then. Um, and I think we had a lot of interest in that because obviously the content was different. It was edgy. Um, but it was something, like I said, that kind of sparked me to kind of head down this path. And for the people who are watching on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram who didn't see on Facebook what we went over, I'm gonna go over some of those didn't see some of those right now. We had, let me see. Oh, quite a few comments. One comment was, let's see, from a good friend of mine, Moses. Moses said, "Do you really think all black men are blessed below the waist, or is this a rumor made up by black men to conquer more women? Don't worry, I'll keep the questions coming." And so like those are the type of interactions that the Ask a Black Guy forum would have. And I think the interesting thing about being a black man is that obviously every ethnicity has stereotypes. Um, and I think that the interesting thing about being a black man is that we are aware of the stereotypes, but there are opportunities where we fully adhere to the stereotypes. There's other opportunities where we say that doesn't apply to me or that doesn't apply to anybody. And that's really coming out of, like a racist overtone or whatever the case is. But there are other stereotypes where we say, oh, yeah, I definitely subscribe to that. Right. Like me personally, one of the stereotypes is that black men um, will, what's the way to say it? I mean, even if we do something real general, right? All black people like chicken. I love chicken. I made chicken the other night, right? I love Popeyes. Um, Me and my sister were talking about the fact that Popeyes has a fried chicken an entire turkey that you can get for Thanksgiving. Like it's crazy, right? Like I love it. But I also recognize that subscribing to that stereotype leads credence to other stereotypes, right? And there's nothing wrong with liking chicken, but at the same time, people will use that to say, well, they like chicken and they're like this. And for people who don't know Black people, who only have one Black friend or have no Black friends, it's it's an interesting opportunity for them to say, hey, I've always heard this about Black people. Is this true? And I think one of the things that people respect about me is that I'm going to be honest, I'm going to be transparent, whether it's negative or positive. And yes, there are some positive stereotypes that as a Black man I subscribe to. And there probably are some negative stereotypes that as a Black man I subscribe to. And I think that I'm going to be honest and open about those. And so, like I said, we had the opportunity to bring that back this past week, and it was very interesting to say the least. So we're probably going to do that again this coming Friday. Now that I think that a lot of people's interests are peaked. If you're friends with me on Facebook, you can go back through my videos. Well, now they call them reels, but you can go back through my videos or reels, go all the way back to 2017, 2018, and you'll see the videos for those. I might download and repost them because they're pretty raw. You know, there wasn't any, it wasn't like this, right? It wasn't on StreamYard. There wasn't much thought behind it. It was just kind of, hey, I got these questions throughout the week. I'm gonna answer them on the live. So we'll probably bring that back again on Friday and get a little bit more interest. So we'll keep going with that. But I want to thank everybody who commented. I think there were some people who liked the post who didn't comment. So hopefully this Friday you will comment. If you don't, I will call you out to get you to engage because clearly you saw it anyway. And so we're gonna go with that. But so we definitely we had a good time with that. So we're gonna continue that as well. One of the big updates for the show, going into 2026, I have located a studio in Tampa, here in Tampa, where I can do the show in the studio. I'm super excited about that because the original motivation for this was to have like a TV show, right? Um, and the podcast online was cool. It was fun. And I still like doing it, but I want to go to the next level. And I think the next level is being in studio. Um, I think it offers its own unique perspectives. I think it offers a little bit more visibility, but I also think it has its own challenges as well. Um, but I think it's a lot of that it offers a lot of opportunity. So um, I've located that, I've nailed that down. So I'll be investigating that even a little bit further. But that'll be coming in 2026. So it'll still be live. You'll still be able to watch the show live on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube, but it won't be this. It'll be live in studio. So you guys will get to see that as well. So we'll continue with that going forward. So that's something huge to look forward to in 2026. And I'm thankful to have the opportunity to do that. As podcasting gets bigger, there's more and more spaces that are opening up um, everywhere where you can just go in, use their studio for like an hour, 2 hours, whatever, um, and put out a good product. So uh, that's something I'm definitely looking forward to in 2026. Um, Another big thing that's happening in 2026 is that I would like to travel and do some interviews, kind of like on location. Like I think it would be cool to do that. I know we've had a lot of people, comment in the chat, and I have friends all across the country. Um, I've had an opportunity to live in a few different states, and I've met people who have lived in other states and they now reside all over the country. So I think it would be cool as well to go and on location in a place and do an interview because I watch people on YouTube, like I'm big into true crime. And I watch people go and they'll do interviews in these locations. And I'm like, man, it would be great to do that. But there's nothing stopping me from doing it, right? I can take a weekend and go and do an interview or, something like that. So that's something that I want to do in 2026 as well. And obviously if some things fall into place, that'll be something that we can take advantage of in 2026. So but on a lighter note, um I came across a post. This was maybe 2 weeks ago, that I wanted to share, where basically it was a post about men feeling like women only wanted money from them. And it was, let me see, this was on Spiritual World on Instagram. And let me present that now. Let's see. Share screen. Nope, that one. Okay. All right, perfect. So um if you can see, it says, not being funny, I feel like men exaggerate this. I honestly don't think girlies are out here begging like they claim they are. And this is a whole thread. So we're gonna go through the thread. Um first the first slide says, hey, louder and better than the others. The woman says, hi, send money and I'll believe you. And the man says, I'm fine with you not believing me. And she says, oh, wow. So that, I mean, that's kind of light, but that kind of gives you an insight into where this thread is going. Um, let's see. Oh, they might have took it down. Oh, they might have took it down. So um, let's see. Stop sharing. So that's something I thought was super interesting, right? Because I think that there is a population of men who think that women um are only out for money. And there are women who think that men only offer all they have to offer is money. And I think it's very interesting because as a man, I think that you kind of get conditioned to believing that you have to lead with that. And it's such a deep rooted societal construct, right? Um, I think like as a young man, you have your father, you have older brothers, uncles, grandfather maybe, who grew up during times where they might say, oh, here's how you treat a young lady, right? You go buy her flowers and you go take her to a fancy restaurant and and you do these things. Um, and that's how it was done in 1940, 50, 60, 70, 80, right? But times have changed. And I think that when times changed, that social construct did not. It just gets applied in a different way. Um, because now buying her flowers and taking her to a fancy dinner, whereas in 1960 might have cost you 30 or 40 bucks, now costs you 250. Just because things are more expensive and times have changed. So I we haven't really had any female guests on the show that have spoken to maybe Kadriana, but we haven't really had any female guests on the show who have spoken to how they were raised and what to expect. But I can definitely tell you from a male's perspective, um, how I was raised at least, and I'm sure I wasn't the only male who was raised that way, but how I was raised to adhere to certain courting standards, right? Um, I'm 42 years old now. And at 42 years old, I can tell you, even in my 20s, there were women that I met in my 20s who had never been on an actual date. And this is mid 20s, 25, 26, 27, 28 years old who had never been on a real date. Um, who said I've never gone to a restaurant on a date. I've never gone out to dinner and a movie on a date. And for me, I just thought that that's just normal, right? That's just kind of what you do. But I don't think that a lot of women experience that, and I'm not 100% sure why that is. Maybe we'll get into that with our guest next week. Uh, she's an author. She's written um, some literature on her experiences, obviously as a woman and dating. So it'll be super interesting to dig into that with her. But so look forward to that next week. But um, like I said, from a man's perspective, I can always tell you like, hey, here's what um, you know, as a young man, 8, 9, 10 years old, I was taught by my father how to be chivalrous and what chivalry meant. But I also understand that he grew up in a time where things were very, very different, right? And I still apply, and I still adhere to those things. I still apply those things. But I think that a lot of it has become outdated, and I think that the men that are raising young men now are not raising them in that way. And I can't say that it's good or bad because this is a different time than my father was raised in for him to pass that knowledge on to me. Um, I think everything that we do obviously is applied to the time that we're living in. So, you know, men are not going to take their jacket off, throw it in a rain puddle so that she doesn't get her shoes wet. Like that's not going to happen in 2025, 2026. Um, but women now in 2025, 2026 may not want you to come to their house and pick them up. They may come to your house and pick you up. And they might pay for the date, or they may have a restaurant in mind that they've always wanted to try and go to. And so things are very different now than they were back then. And we have, I think, a lot of miscommunication on our expectations and where we want to go with that. But yeah, like I said, we're definitely going to touch on that next week with the young lady who's coming on. You guys will obviously see the promo and you'll find out who she is and you'll be able to look into her background. So that'll be coming out within the next day or two. So be on the lookout for that. Um, but getting back to being thankful in 2025, I'm thankful that the people that have made it this far, that are still with us, um, made it, right? I think that's one of the biggest things. I remember somebody, Shar, who was a prior guest on the show, said being 40 years old and having no health problems is one of the biggest blessings that you can have. And I think that that's huge because a lot of people, November 19th, 2025, are not with us because of health issues, whether it was things that they could control or that were out of their control, um, did not make it to see Thanksgiving this year. And that's super heavy to think about because going into 2026, we have an opportunity to reach out to the people who are around us, our friends, our family, our coworkers, and encourage them to do just little things, right? Um, whether that's just going to the doctor and getting a general checkup every 6 months, every 8 months, once a year, twice a year, whatever the case is. A lot of people just don't do that. And it's unfortunate because I think we put a lot of emphasis and a lot of attention toward things that are not making us healthy. And I'm not going to get into the, I have friends who are super herbal and they're like sea moss is the next big thing and it's huge and beef tallow and there's all these things that come out that are super trendy. Whatever you believe in helps you, by all means investigate it to the fullest. But I don't think that a lot of people take their health seriously. And this is your internal health, right? This is not just going to the gym every day. Your internal health, they don't take it seriously. And at the end of 2026, we want to be in a position where the people who are with us now are with us at the end of 2026. So we have an opportunity to reach out to the people who are close to us, and try to encourage them to do things that are going to promote better health with them. Um, like Flex, who's on the show all the time, um, has investigated his love of boxing, right? And for me, I'm like, hey, anytime I go box, you can come box with me. And sometimes that's all it takes is for you to identify something in someone that you may have a passion for as well, and you invite them to go with you, whether that's let's go for a run or oh, you like to ride bikes, let's go on a bike ride, or because I think a lot of people just don't want to do things alone. And I think that's a barrier to them being or a barrier to them living a healthier lifestyle. Um, and sometimes you have to be that person, right? You have to be that person to get them up, get them out the house, help them go do something that will promote them to live a better lifestyle. And it's not always about how you look on the outside, right? It's a lot of times how you feel on the inside. Do you feel better moving? Do you feel better eating cleaner? Do you feel better not drinking as much as I take a drink here? Do you feel better doing those things? And sometimes we have to encourage the people around us to do that. Even if they say no, you did your part you offered, right? Um, Now let's talk about relationships going into uh, ending 2025, going into 2026. I think for people who are ending 2025 single, looking back on 2025 should be a very sobering opportunity for you because if you ended 2024 the same way, then something didn't change between last Thanksgiving, last Christmas, and this year. And for people, we have to realize that we are 100% in control of the situations we put ourselves in, the people we attach ourselves to, and the things that we invest our energy and time into. And putting yourself in a place mentally, spiritually, and if you're not spiritual, emotionally, and physically in a place where you can be in a fruitful relationship, um, is first and foremost. Before you actually start putting yourself out there to find that person, those things have to be nailed down first. And I can speak 100% from experience in past years saying I got out there too soon. Um, I ended one situationship and I got right into another one. And that's not always the best process. Um, so if you're ending 2025 the same way that you ended 2024, you have to ask yourself, what are you going to do different in 2026? Right? If nothing changes, then everything is going to stay the same. Um, where's my mic's not working? Felix, we got Felix checking in. Um, what's up, Flex? And you have to ask yourself, what can I do differently in 2026 that I didn't do in 2025? That I didn't do in 2024. And your minds, and this is not for women, this is for men and women, right? Your mindset can't be, I'm doing all the right things and everybody else is just bad, right? Um, that's not the answer. It's not the answer. Um, if nothing changes with you, then none of the outcomes for this from the situations you put yourself in are going to change. And sometimes that requires stepping outside of your comfort zone. Sometimes that requires taking a hard look at yourself and saying, this about me is not working. Um, I need to do some hard work on fixing this before I continue to put myself in those situations that are going to end up not being fruitful because of this thing. And we all can identify those things in ourselves. Um, it really comes down to, are you going to be honest, right, with who you are? And we, I think, as people, it's easy for us to lie to ourselves and tell ourselves that everything I'm doing is right, everything I'm doing is pushing me in the right direction, um and I feel great about what I'm doing. And one of the biggest lies that we can tell ourselves is complacency. When you get used to doing the same things, going to the same places, talking to the same people, eating the same food, drinking the same drinks, taking the same route to work every day. When you get into that routine, it's hard for you to step away from it objectively and say, this is what I need to change. And if you can look back on 2025, 2024, maybe 2023, if you want to keep going, maybe even further than that, if you want to keep looking back on those things and say, um, I can recognize where I didn't put in as much effort as I thought I was. I can recognize where I wasn't as good to that person as I thought I was being. I can recognize where I misjudged situations, but didn't have enough humility to say I was wrong. If you can look back on those situations, see those things, but then tell the truth to yourself that you have some work to do, then that's what the goal should be for 2026, right? The goal should not be let me find my person in 2026. The goal should be, let me fix the things that were broken in 2025. Let me fix the things that were broken in 2024. And in 2026, let me work on those things. And the person that I'm supposed to invest in um, will find their way to me. And I think that you have to make space um for that person to see you and find you, but you also have to be ready at that point. Um I know on the show that we've talked about in the past, there's some people believe in a single you and then a relationship you, right? And my cousin, Darius, big shout out to for show. Um, he texted me one day, and me and him were going back and forth about relationships and marriage, and he said he quoted a Bible verse. He said, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing," and I think that that was very profound because it's saying that the person that you find is already wife material, not I found her and I have to try to convince her to be wife material. And this is not just for women, right? This could go both ways. Um, but I found her and now I have to try to convince her to not go out so much or to how to do things to make a home or how to be more affectionate or how to do this, how to do that. That's not what that quote is saying. And I think that for 2026, for the people who were not successful in finding their person in 2025, you have to ask yourself, was I ready? Right? Was I even ready to be that person for someone? If someone had found me and they were ready to commit, was I even that person that could make that commitment? Or being honest, was I not ready? And I just was out here trying to find somebody because it sounded like a good idea. Like, and that happens too. Flex says true. He says single me and relationship me. Right. So, I feel like when you want to be single, there's nothing wrong with being single, right? Live your life to the fullest, be single, do what you want to do. But when you start getting into that mind frame and you say, I want to settle down, I want to put myself in a position to find my person, then that single you has to change to relationship ready you. And I think that there are men and women who don't believe in making that shift. They believe in this is how I am, accept me how I am right now. But if you're not doing the work to make yourself relationship ready, then that relationship that you enter is not going to be fruitful. And it really comes down to be because you weren't being honest with yourself. Um, and that's the hardest thing to do is for people to be honest to themselves. It's easy to lie to a stranger, right? It's easy to lie to somebody that you just met. If you go out to the club tonight, you can lie to that person and tell them that you do blah 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 whatever. But lying to yourself and having to look in the mirror at yourself is always going to be a harder pill to swallow. So, getting ready for dating in 2026 is not, well, let me retool the type of man I'm looking for, or let me think more about the type of woman that I would like to date. It's not about that because the people that are out there are already there. right? The people who are in the world right now, they're already there. The only thing that's going to change about the interactions is you. And you have to put in the work to do the change now. And it may take you till next summer for you to come to grasp with some trauma that you've had, or to talk to somebody and release some demons that you've been dealing with from past relationships. It may take you to next summer. It might take you to next fall. But if you put in the work and you start working on it now, if you met somebody next Labor Day, you'll be ready to be the person that the best version of yourself you can be for them. And they'll appreciate you for doing the work to be ready for them then. Um, because nothing's worse than feeling like your time was wasted, wasting someone else's time, um, over things that you could have addressed and fixed yourself. So as we head into 2026, there's a lot of retooling that we have to do. There's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of honesty that's going to take place. There's a lot of come to the carpet moments that we have to have. And one of the one of the harder pills to swallow is going to be working on yourself, putting yourself in a great position. Uh, you know, I think, a lot of people use the term focus on yourself, but that's true. You have to focus on yourself at the beginning to make yourself a better person. And that that connection that you're looking for in another person, it will happen. You can't rush it. It will happen, right? You have to just focus on making yourself the best version of you that you can be, so that when 2026 hits the ground running, um, you'll be ready to be fruitful and profitable in that space. Um, Outside of that, um, I think we've had some great shows this year. I'm thankful for absolutely every guest that we've had on. We, we tell the joke that we're the 90, what was it, like the 92nd best relationship, dating, mental health show in, what was it, Turkey? Um, but that just goes to show that what you put out in the world doesn't have to touch everybody. Um, you really just have to reach a couple people that feel what you're saying to have an impact. And when I approach people about being on the show, I say, hey, the show's available on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, but Apple Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, iHeartRadio. Um, these are worldwide platforms. And the things that we say and do as content creators have a lot of reach and a lot of impact. Um, but that's necessary. That's necessary. Uh Flex said word because none of y'all females are perfect and dudes. Right. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. Everybody could use some work. Um, you know, and that's where being honest comes in. Are you being honest with yourself and saying, I could use some work? There's some things I could be better at. Um, Flex said they scared. You know what? And I think that being on a podcast and being open and transparent is not for everybody. It's not, because people who know you, like you can't get on a podcast and be a completely different person than who you are every day. And the reason is because the people who you know personally who watch it are going to say, that's not how you are. That's not what you think. That's not what you said this weekend. And that creates problems not only in your personal life, but it makes people think about you differently, right? Um, it makes people think that you will get online and say whatever you want because you're presenting a persona, right? It's kind of like Instagram, right? You or social media, not even necessarily Instagram, but social media. You can be whoever you want to be on social media. You could present a lifestyle where you travel every week and you got money and you drive expensive cars and you do all these things. But the people who see you every day know that your lifestyle is not like that. It's the same thing with podcasts. You can't get on a podcast and say, I believe in this and I act this way and I do this and I do that, because the people who know you're going to say you're not like that at all, which affects your level of credibility and it makes you look like a clown at the end of the day, right? And like I said, that's not for everybody. Get Being on a podcast is not an opportunity for you to create a persona. Being on a podcast is an opportunity for you to express who you are as a person, and the people who find that interesting are going to gravitate towards that. I posted a statistic, I believe it was last week, and it said that uh, it was something crazy. It was basically like 80% of podcasts or 90% of podcasts don't make it past like 3 or 4 episodes, uh, because, and it didn't go into the reason why, but this is why I think it's because everyone thinks it's a great idea to have a podcast. But what they don't take into consideration is that if people don't like you before the podcast, then there's no podcast, right? If you're not interesting before the podcast is not going to make you interesting, right? Um, if you're not well traveled, if you haven't had a wealth of lifetime experience, if you're not well cultured, if you don't have a diverse friend group, if you can't speak on current events and different topics and all these things, if you can't do those things, being on a podcast is not going to make you interesting. It's not. Um, and you're going to try it and you're not going to be successful because you don't really have anything to talk about. And at the end of the day, having a lot of life experience is what makes a lot of the successful podcasters successful, because they can talk on a lot of things and you know their history. So you believe the things they're saying and you give credibility to their point of view because you know they've had those experiences, right? Um, I can speak on being a professional athlete. I can speak on being in the music industry. I can speak on being a father. I can speak on working a 9 to 5. I can speak on traveling outside the country. I can speak on all those things because I've had those experiences and that makes it interesting. But if you don't have any of those things and you can't talk about it and you pigeonhole yourself into, well, I'm just going to talk about why women hate men. Okay, that's going to get old. Um, and it lacks depth. And at some point, you have to evolve as times evolve and things of that nature. And when you want to put yourself in a position where you want to expand and you want to reach out to different markets and you want to, attack different uh, demographics, you have to be relatable. And that goes back to, like I said, what Flex was saying. It's not necessarily that they're scared. I think it's just that you have to have a certain personality, and everyone doesn't have that personality. Um, Flex knows he presented a young lady who wanted to be on a show, and she said, "I'm not in the mental space to be on a podcast." And for whatever reason, she didn't really give any more um insight into why she said that, but she said, "I'm just not." She's like, "I would love to do it. I'm just not in a mental space to be on a podcast." And it is it's a transparent hour and a half of your life that a lot of people are not ready for. A lot of people are not ready for. So, um, I'm not saying you have to be squeaky clean, because people like to see dirt and everything like that, Geneva checking in. What's up, baby? She said, not everyone has depth, period. Everybody doesn't. Everybody doesn't. And being superficial or one dimensional, it gets old. It gets old. And I think one of the tricky things about podcasts is they kind of preach to you, and they say you have to pick a market, pick a niche, and attack that. And that kind of speaks directly to what I'm saying, is in opposition to what I'm saying, because even those people end up changing, right? If you look at like Joe Rogan, if you look at early Joe Rogan podcast episodes, it was very one track. Now he's all over the place. He might be talking to somebody who believes in aliens one week, and next week he's talking about the Epstein files. The next week he's talking about quantum physics. Like, he's all over the place because it was superficial and it got old, right? Um, so I say all that to say this. It's not I don't think it's necessarily that they're scared. I think that you have to have a certain personality for podcasting. Um, and it's not made for everybody. Like, if you watch the Joe Budden podcast, Joe Budden has tons of personality, right? But all of the co-hosts don't, you know. And he has people on the show from time to time who are guests, and he might have reoccurring co-hosts that might come in and out from time to time and things like that. But they don't have the same level of personality that he has. But he also speaks on a lot of things that he has experience with, and people automatically know, well, that's Joe Budden. Like, he knows about the music industry and marketing and marriage and being a father, and he knows about these things, and everybody knows that. So it adds to his level of credibility. Um, but like I said, it's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. So um at the end of the day, I'm very blessed to be able to have an opportunity to not only share my experiences, stories. I have a wealth of diversity in my friend group, um, who can speak to me about different things that I may not be knowledgeable about, and they can educate me on the things that they might be going through that I have no experience with. But that also adds to the things that I can talk about, you know. And so in 2026, we're going to be shifting gears, and we're going to be talking a lot more about um A lot more about current events, a lot more about things that are important to people, um, a lot more things that are relatable to people. We had a conversation with a good friend of mine, Eric Todd Shumway, a couple shows back that was off topic for us at the time, but eye opening at the same time. And that's one of the directions that I definitely want us to go in as a podcast going into the future, is to broach a lot more topics that are important to people. I think my initial drive was to kind of stay away from like polarizing things. I didn't want to talk about um, politics. I didn't want to talk about race relations. I kind of just wanted to talk about lighthearted things, and not get too deep. But I think it's time for us to evolve and go in a direction where, yeah, we can still talk about dating and funny stories and things of that nature, but there's also a lot of things going on in the world that are as equally important, um, that we're going to touch on too. It's not always going to be that. Um, it's going to be a lot of different things. But I think that's the best way for us to keep it interesting in 2026. Like I said, being in studio, you want to, I might have Flex on, in the studio one week. It might be Geneva one week. Ron DeSantis might be walking down the street. We pull him in and talk to Ron DeSantis one week. Um, Maybe not. But at the same time, um, we're gonna do a little bit more variety. So keep it a little bit more diversified. But at the end of the day, um, as we wind down 2025, like I said, speaking on the things that are super, super important. Leonidas, my guy Leonidas checking in. I just want to say a special shout out to my guy Leonidas. If you're in the Phoenix area and you need any, and I'm talking about any um high end custom transportation, and I'm talking about black car service. I'm talking about black car service, door to door. You got to hit up Leonidas. Got to hit up Leonidas. He's gonna take care of you. He's gonna make sure that you have everything you need. Um, and I'm glad I'm at the point in my life where I can say I know a guy. Right? If I touch down in Phoenix and I say, you know what, I need a Sprinter van that's decked out, I know who to call because I know that guy. So Leonidas is that person. So shout out to my guy Leonidas. Thank you for checking in. Felix said podcast with food and drinks. You know what, Felix? I was thinking about, it's funny you say that because I was thinking about changing it to um from the Cabrini kid to like dinner with Dave. And all the guests, we would just sit at the table and we would eat and we would laugh and drink, kind of like drink champs, but not just with drinks, but with like food too. I was thinking about doing something like that, but I feel like that would be very expensive, and we have to find some place to have it. But it's on the table. I was thinking about that. I was thinking about that. But yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and wrap it up for this week. Next week, like I said, be on the lookout for the promo. I'm gonna probably put that out tomorrow. I already got it done. Put that out tomorrow. Young lady's coming on. She's an author. She's written, like I said, a lot of literature about her journey. She has some stories that we're gonna get into that are absolutely, I'm gonna just get out a sneak peek. So she drove an hour to meet a dude for a date, and the guy wasn't there. That's all I'm gonna say. That's all I'm gonna say. You got to check in next week to see the rest of the story. She drove an hour to meet a dude for a date, and he wasn't there. But check in next week, and we're gonna dive into that. But in the meantime, I hope that everybody is safe. Next week's show is going to be on Tuesday. It's not going to be on Wednesday because that's right before Thanksgiving. It's going to be on Tuesday next week, so a day early. But I will see everybody next week. We will have our guests there. I hope everybody is safe. You can catch the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio. You can see all the reels on Facebook and Instagram. So go follow the Instagram, the Cabrini Kid Podcast. Follow the YouTube, the Cabrini Kid Podcast as well. The QR code is on my Facebook, so you can just scan it. It'll take you right to the YouTube channel, and you can watch them there. But we got some big things lined up for 2026. Let me see. Felix said, I can't have people that eat too much. He said, "Dang, sound like the girl I tried to meet, but she was whack, so I turned back on the train." Yeah, Geneva said, like and subscribe. Like, subscribe, share, turn on the notifications so you know when we go on live. And we'll see everybody next Tuesday, not Wednesday, next Tuesday. Peace.